The unexpected invitation. The package was already signed for, the older delivery driver, 55, gruff but kind, ready to head back to his truck. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, balancing the box against her hip. "Kind of heavy," she said with a grin. "Want to come in? I just turned 18. He hesitated at the threshold, not related to her in any way, but caught off guard by the boldness in her voice. The air between them thickened with flirty tension, the simple delivery no longer feeling simple. The late afternoon sun, already dipping low, cast long shadows across the hallway of Sarah's apartment building. Dust motes danced in the golden light, oblivious to the sudden, unexpected shift in atmosphere. Sarah, with her messy bun and paint-splattered jeans, looked entirely too comfortable wielding a box that clearly outweighed her. She grunted softly, shifting her grip, a stray strand of hair falling across her face. Her eyes, usually sparkling with an uncontainable energy, narrowed slightly with effort. The box, unmarked and unassuming, felt like it was filled with lead. Mr. Henderson, a man whose life revolved around precise routes and impersonal transactions, stood frozen. His hand, still hovering near the brim of his cap, dropped slowly to his side. His usual response to such a situation would be a quick, professional refusal, perhaps a mumbled excuse about needing to stay on schedule. But the words, usually so readily available, caught in his throat. Sarah's grin, wide and unburdened, held a curious mixture of mischief and genuine invitation. It wasn't predatory, nor was it desperate. It was simply bold. "Heavy, huh?" Mr. Henderson finally managed, his voice a little rougher than usual. He glanced at the box, then back at Sarah, a flicker of something unreadable in his tired eyes. He'd seen his share of young women in his 30 years on the job, but none quite like this. Most were timid, or overly cautious, or too busy to even make eye contact. Sarah was none of those things. Her independence, almost palpable, seemed to radiate from her. "Yeah, feels like I ordered a small anvil," she joked, her tone light despite the strain. She pushed the door open wider, revealing a glimpse of her eclectic living room, a worn velvet armchair, a stack of art books precariously balanced, and a canvas on an easel, half finished. "Seriously, though. You look like you could use a break. And it's not like I'm going to wrestle this thing through the doorway by myself." The offer, initially tinged with a playful flirtation, now held a surprising note of practicality. Mr. Henderson found himself considering it. His shift had been long, the traffic particularly brutal. A moment of respite, even if just to help maneuver a heavy box, held an unexpected appeal. But it wasn't just the prospect of a break. It was the way Sarah looked at him, not as a delivery drone, but as a person. He hesitated, his gaze sweeping over the inviting interior of her apartment. It smelled faintly of paint and something sweet, like baking cookies, though he knew that was probably just his imagination. His internal clock, usually a relentless taskmaster, seemed to quiet. He thought of his next stop, another apartment building, another anonymous delivery. This, however, felt distinctly unanonymous. I really shouldn't," he began, the familiar script forming on his tongue. But then he saw the slight tremor in Sarah's arms as she struggled again with the box, and the genuine, open curiosity in her eyes. It was a look that said she wasn't judging him, merely observing. A sudden, uncharacteristic impulse seized him. Against every fiber of his routine-bound being, against the ingrained habit of maintaining a professional distance, he found himself stepping over the threshold. The warmth of the apartment enveloped him, a stark contrast to the cool, impersonal hallway. The heavy box, momentarily forgotten, seemed to recede into the background of this entirely unexpected moment. Sarah's grin widened, a silent victory. "Welcome," she said, her voice soft now, almost a murmur. "It's just me and this beast." Lemonade and lingering questions. "Lemonade?" Sarah offered, stepping back to allow him more room in the small, sun-drenched kitchen. The air inside was considerably cooler than the sweltering August afternoon, a faint scent of lemon and something vaguely floral clinging to it. Mr. Henderson, still holding his clipboard, looked around, his gaze lingering on a vibrant, slightly askew painting of a sunflower on the wall. Sure, I guess," he mumbled, his gruffness softened by a hint of surprise. Sarah poured 2 tall glasses, the clinking of ice cubes a cheerful counterpoint to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. She pushed one across the small, worn kitchen table, taking the seat opposite him. He sat stiffly at first, his large hands resting on the tabletop, looking almost too big for the space. The first sip of lemonade was long and slow, a visible release of tension in his shoulders as the tart sweetness hit its mark. "So, new place, huh?" he ventured, setting the glass down with a soft thud. "Just moved in?" "Yesterday," Sarah confirmed, a mischievous glint dancing in her eyes. "Still boxes everywhere, but the essentials are unpacked." "Like the lemonade." She gestured around, a playful shrug accompanying the movement. "It's small, but it's mine." "First time living alone?" He nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "It's cozy. Got a good route for deliveries around here. Used to be more spread out, but they condensed it last year. Less driving, more stopping." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, gone as quickly as it appeared. "You'll probably see a lot of me." Sarah leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "I'm banking on it." "So, what's it like, being a delivery driver? Lots of interesting houses? Dogs?" He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that surprised them both. "Mostly dogs. And folks who aren't home. But yeah, you see a lot. Sometimes you get to know the regulars. Kids growing up, new paint jobs, that sort of thing." He took another sip of lemonade, his eyes scanning the room once more, this time with a less critical, more reflective air. "Never really thought about it much, just a job. But sometimes, you get a glimpse into a lot of different lives." An easy quiet settled between them, not awkward but comfortable, filled with the gentle clinking of ice and the distant drone of cicadas. Sarah found herself relaxing, the initial impulse that had led her to invite him in giving way to genuine curiosity. He, in turn, seemed to shed some of the road-worn weariness that had clung to him, his posture softening, his gaze less guarded. It was an unexpected connection, born of a simple delivery and a glass of lemonade, yet already it felt like something more substantial was brewing beneath the surface. The package may have been signed for, but the questions lingering in the air between them felt far from resolved. Stories from the road. The late afternoon sun, mellow and long, cast the living room in a warm, golden glow. Mr. Henderson, perched on the edge of the worn armchair, had initially been reluctant to share, his gaze fixed on the dust motes dancing in the light. But Sarah's genuine interest, her open, expectant face, had slowly chipped away at his reserve. He cleared his throat, a sound like rustling dry leaves, and began. "Used to drive a flatbed, way back," he started, his voice a low rumble. "Before the big rigs had all the bells and whistles. We were on the road for weeks sometimes, just the truck and me, and whatever cargo needed hauling." He paused, a faint smile touching the corners of his lips. "One time, near the Arizona border, I was hauling a load of, well, let's just say fragile wasn't in its vocabulary. Heavy machinery. Blew a tire in the middle of nowhere. No cell service then, of course. Just miles of scrub brush and a sky full of stars." Sarah, perched on the edge of the sofa, leaned forward, her chin propped on her hands. The mischievous glint in her eyes had softened into pure fascination. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He chuckled, a dry, rusty sound. "What could I do? Walked 10 miles to the nearest diner, hitched a ride back with the only mechanic in 50 miles, and spent the night under that truck, changing the tire by the light of a fading flashlight. The coyotes were howling all night. Made you feel mighty small, out there." He continued, his stories flowing more freely now. Tales of blizzards in the Rockies that froze the diesel lines, of sweltering summer days when the asphalt shimmered like a mirage, of unexpected kindness from strangers in roadside diners. He spoke of the camaraderie amongst truckers, a silent understanding forged on endless highways, and of the profound solitude of long stretches of road. Sarah hung on every word, her earlier playful teasing forgotten. She saw the vast, untamed landscapes through his eyes, felt the bone-rattling vibrations of the old truck, smelled the diesel and the dust. He wasn't just recounting events, he was painting a vivid tapestry of a life lived on the fringes, independent and demanding. There was this one time, he said, a glint appearing in his own eyes now. I was delivering a prize-winning show pig to a fair in Kansas. Had him in a specially built crate. Well, we hit a bump a little too hard, and the latch on the crate gave way. Next thing I know, I've got a very confused, very large pig trotting around the back of my flatbed, eyeing the open highway like it was an invitation. Sarah burst out laughing, a bright, clear sound that filled the room. No way. What did you do? He grinned, a genuine, unburdened smile that transformed his gruff features. Managed to coax him back in with a half-eaten sandwich. The things you learn on the road, kid. Adapt or be left behind. As the shadows deepened outside, painting the room in shades of violet and gray, the unspoken tension that had shimmered between them earlier had completely dissipated. In its place, a quiet, unexpected connection had formed, woven from shared laughter and the threads of a life far removed from her own. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, a surprising sense of belonging in the company of this man and his extraordinary, ordinary stories. The delivery, once a simple transaction, had become something far more profound. A storm traps them in. The playful air in Sarah's apartment began to shift, a subtle change that drew her gaze toward the large window overlooking the street. Beyond the glass, the sky was transforming with startling speed. What had been a mild, late-afternoon glow was now a bruised purple-gray, thick with impending rain. Clouds, previously wispy and scattered, had coalesced into a dense, churning mass that seemed to descend upon the city rooftops. A low rumble, distinct from any urban noise, vibrated through the floorboards. "Looks like we're in for it," Sarah murmured, more to herself than to Mr. Henderson. He had been halfway to the door, a polite refusal of her earlier, audacious invitation still on his lips. His movements now stalled, his attention also caught by the dramatic shift in the weather. The first fat drop splattered against the window pane, dark kisses on the dusty glass, quickly followed by a torrent. The world outside blurred into a watery sheet, obscuring the buildings across the street. Then came the thunder, not a distant grumble but a sharp, cracking retort that made the window rattle in its frame. The apartment plunged into a brief, flickering gloom as the streetlights outside struggled against the sudden darkness. Rain lashed against the building with a fury, sounding like 1,000 tiny fists pounding on the walls. The wind howled, a mournful cry that seeped through the window seams. Mr. Henderson turned from the door, his expression a mixture of surprise and something else Sarah couldn't quite decipher, perhaps a flicker of resignation. He gestured vaguely towards the tempest outside. "I don't think I'll be going anywhere in that." His voice, usually gruff, held a new, almost understated quality. The simple act of departure, which had seemed imminent moments ago, was now an impossibility. His truck, parked just outside, was already being swallowed by the downpour, a faint silhouette against the gray. Sarah's eyes, bright with an unreadable emotion, met his. A small, knowing smile played on her lips. "Nope," she confirmed, her voice barely audible above the storm's crescendo. "Looks like you're stuck." The casualness of her tone belied the unexpected turn of events. She wasn't just observing, she was almost pleased. The space between them, already charged with an unspoken current, now felt smaller, more contained. The sudden imprisonment of the storm didn't feel like a disruption to her, it felt like an opportunity. He sighed, a sound that was half exasperation, half a weary acceptance. His gaze swept around her small, somewhat cluttered living room, a space that now felt less like a temporary stop and more like an unintended haven. The air, heavy with the scent of damp earth carried on the wind and the faint, sweet smell of her perfume, crackled with an undeniable tension. The storm outside raged, trapping them in, and with each lightning flash, the unusual predicament of the delivery driver and the young woman deepened. There was no escape now, only the forced intimacy of shared shelter. The fading photograph. The wind held a mournful tune outside, rattling the old window panes in their frames. Rain lashed against the glass and sheets, each gust threatening to tear the house from its foundations. Sarah, restless and bored by the storm's relentless assault, decided to tackle the one chore she'd been avoiding, organizing the dusty, forgotten corner of the attic. With a sigh that mingled exasperation and a flicker of curiosity, she dragged a large, unlabeled cardboard box closer. It was surprisingly heavy, filled with a forgotten generation's keepsakes. As she knelt, attempting to lift it onto a sturdy old trunk, her elbow caught the corner with an audible thud. The box tilted precariously, then, with a groan of splitting cardboard, gave way. A cascade of brittle papers, yellowed letters tied with faded ribbons, and a blizzard of photographs erupted across the attic floor. Sarah yelped, a mix of frustration and genuine surprise, as a small, ornate locket clattered against her knee. "Great," she muttered, pushing a stray strand of hair from her eyes. "Just what I needed." She started to gather the scattered memories, her fingers tracing the edges of sepia-toned portraits and blurry vacation snapshots. There were baby pictures of her grandmother, stern-faced relatives in formal attire, and images of landscapes that no longer existed. Each pickup felt like uncovering a tiny piece of a lost world. The rain continued its furious drumming, providing a rhythmic backdrop to her impromptu archaeological dig. Her gaze drifted over a cluster of black and white photos, some curled at the edges, others with creases like old scars. One particular image, faded almost to oblivion, caught her eye. It was a group shot, taken outdoors, of several young men in what looked like military uniforms. They were laughing, their faces illuminated by a carefree exuberance that time had long since extinguished. Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. One face, younger, less burdened by the years, but undeniably familiar, stared back at her. Her breath hitched. The mischievous glint in the eyes, the slight quirk of a smile that spoke of an untamed spirit, it was unmistakable. "No way," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm's roar. She held the photograph closer, her heart thrumming an erratic beat. The man in the picture was leaner, his hair darker, but the bone structure, the distinct shape of his jaw, the intelligent spark in his gaze, it was Mr. Henderson. Her reclusive, elderly neighbor, the man who'd lived next door for as long as she could remember, a fixture of the quiet street, a man she'd only ever known as old and withdrawn. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The old photo, a mere fragment of a forgotten past, had just peeled back a layer of mystery she hadn't even known existed. This wasn't just a photograph, it was a doorway. A doorway into a history far more complex, and perhaps more dangerous, than she could have ever imagined. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest brewing within her. Henry and Eleanor. The package was already signed for, the older delivery driver, 55, gruff but kind, ready to head back to his truck. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, balancing the box against her hip. "Kind of heavy," she said with a grin. "Want to come in? I just turned 18. He hesitated at the threshold, not related to her in any way, but caught off guard by the boldness in her voice. The air between them thickened with flirty tension, the simple delivery no longer feeling simple. His gaze flickered over her, a blush creeping up his neck. No thank you, miss. Got other deliveries." He backed away, a hurried, almost flustered retreat. Sarah chuckled softly, the mischievous glint in her eyes intensifying. She'd always enjoyed pushing boundaries, a trait that both delighted and occasionally exasperated her grandmother. She carried the surprisingly weighty box to the kitchen table, the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic already escaping through the seams. With a grunt, she set it down and tore open the flaps. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed tissue paper, was a wooden box, its surface smooth and dark with age. Lifting the lid, she found a jumble of old photographs, letters tied with faded ribbon, and a small, intricately carved bird. Her fingers traced the rough edges of a sepia-toned photograph at the top of the pile. It showed a young boy, no older than 10, with a shock of unruly dark hair and a wide, gap-toothed smile. He was standing beside a girl with braids, her face turned slightly away, a hint of a dimple visible on her cheek. "Henry?" Sarah breathed, a shiver running down her spine. The name, whispered countless times in her grandmother's wistful stories, suddenly felt incredibly tangible. She remembered the tales of the boy who lived next door, the one with whom Eleanor had shared secrets and dreams, the one who had disappeared without a trace after his family moved away. Just then, Mr. Henderson, Eleanor's live-in aide, walked into the kitchen, a teacup clutched in his hand. He'd lived with them for 2 years, a quiet man who kept mostly to himself, a stark contrast to Sarah's vibrant grandmother. His eyes, usually clouded with a gentle melancholy, widened perceptibly as they landed on the photograph in Sarah's hand. He stopped dead in his tracks, the teacup rattling slightly in its saucer. "Eleanor?" he whispered, his voice thin with surprise, almost a gasp. He took a hesitant step closer, his gaze fixed on the image. His finger, trembling slightly, pointed at the girl with braids. That's Eleanor." Sarah's head snapped up, her heart beginning to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "You recognize her?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This boy, this is Henry. My grandmother's Henry. Her best friend from childhood." Mr. Henderson nodded slowly, his eyes still riveted on the photograph, a profound emotion washing over his usually stoic features. "Yes," he said, his voice gaining a little strength, a tremor of disbelief still lacing his words. "That's Eleanor. And the boy," he paused, his gaze lifting to Sarah's, a sudden, astonishing realization dawning in their depths. "The boy, is me." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible, yet undeniably true. Sarah felt a dizzying rush, a crackle of pure, unadulterated astonishment. The mischievous spark in her eyes had been replaced by wide-eyed wonder. The connection, so utterly improbable, snapped into place with an audible click in her mind. The delivery, the old photographs, the quiet aid, it all converged into this single, incredible moment. Eleanor's long-lost Henry, right here, in their home. The sheer, breathtaking coincidence of it stole her breath. Echoes of the past. The package was already signed for, the older delivery driver, 55, gruff but kind, ready to head back to his truck. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, balancing the box against her hip. "Kind of heavy," she said with a grin. "Want to come in? I just turned 18. He hesitated at the threshold, not related to her in any way, but caught off guard by the boldness in her voice. The air between them thickened with flirty tension, the simple delivery no longer feeling simple. "Sarah, is that you?" a voice called from deeper within the house. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen, a tea towel draped over her shoulder, her eyes widening slightly as she took in the scene. "Mr. Henderson." What a surprise. The tension dissipated like smoke. "Eleanor," Mr. Henderson said, his gruff demeanor softening into something akin to a fond memory. It's been a while, hasn't it, Ellie?" Eleanor's smile deepened. "Far too long, Frank. Come in, please. Don't just stand there on the porch." She gestured him inside, her gaze briefly meeting Sarah's, a knowing glint passing between them. Sarah set the heavy box on the coffee table. "So, you two know each other?" she asked, a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. "And you call her Ellie?" Mr. Henderson chuckled, a surprisingly warm sound. "Known her since we were knee-high to a grasshopper, young lady. We grew up practically next door to each other." He settled into a comfortable armchair, his gaze lingering on Eleanor. "Remember that time, Ellie, when we tried to build a raft to sail down Miller's Creek? Ended up in Mrs. Gable's prize-winning rose bush." Eleanor laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. "Oh, Frank, I'd almost forgotten. She chased us with her broom for a week. You were always the instigator, though, weren't you?" "I was just the willing accomplice." Sarah listened, captivated. These weren't the stories her mother usually told. Eleanor's memories were often filtered through a lens of gentle nostalgia, but Mr. Henderson's recollections brought a fresh, vibrant energy to them. He painted vivid pictures of scraped knees, stolen apples from Farmer McGregor's orchard, and secret clubhouses built from scavenged lumber. "She was a terror, your mother," Mr. Henderson declared with a mock-serious expression, winking at Sarah. "Always getting into trouble, but always with the biggest, most innocent eyes when she got caught. No one could stay mad at her." Sarah grinned. "That sounds exactly like her. She still has that innocent look down pat when she wants something." As the evening wore on, the two old friends continued to trade anecdotes, each story peeling back another layer of Eleanor's past. Sarah found herself drawn into their shared history, piecing together a picture of her mother as a vibrant, spirited girl, a side she hadn't fully known. Mr. Henderson, once a gruff delivery driver, transformed into Frank, a repository of childhood adventures and cherished moments. He spoke of Eleanor's unwavering loyalty, how she'd once stood up to a group of older boys who were teasing him about his hand-me-down clothes. She was tiny, but fierce, he recalled, a softness in his voice. "Always had your back, Ellie did." Eleanor's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "And you, Frank, you taught me how to climb the old oak tree in the park, even though I was terrified of heights." A deep, unexpected connection solidified between Sarah and Mr. Henderson. Through their shared love for Eleanor, a bridge formed, linking present to past, stranger to a surprising new friend. Sarah saw not just her mother, but a broader lineage of connection and enduring affection. The air in the living room, once thick with flirtatious tension, now hummed with the warmth of shared history and newfound understanding. A promise in the moonlight. The last drops of rain tapped against the windowpane, a final, hesitant farewell to the tempest. Then, silence. A sliver of moon, newly freed from its cloudy shroud, pierced the darkness, casting the room in a soft, ethereal glow. The air, still damp and earthy, felt lighter, as if the storm had washed away more than just grime. Mr. Henderson, his earlier gruffness softened by the shared moments, stood by the threshold, a hand resting on the doorframe. The tension that had thrummed between them had subtly shifted, no longer a purely flirtatious hum, but something deeper, more resonant. He cleared his throat, his gaze drifting from Sarah's face to the pale moonlight illuminating the floorboards. I don't know what. A new chapter begins. The scent of old paper and something vaguely metallic still lingered in the air long after Mr. Henderson had departed, leaving Sarah alone in the quiet hum of her apartment. Her heart, which had been a frantic drumbeat against her ribs moments ago, was finally settling into a calmer rhythm. She walked over to the small, sturdy coffee table where the package now rested, its brown cardboard surface looking utterly innocuous given the seismic shift it had just triggered in her world. Who would have thought a simple delivery, a fleeting, almost reckless flirtation, would unravel such a profound mystery? She ran her fingers over the taped seams, a faint smile playing on her lips. It was unbelievable. The kind of story you read in a book, not one you actually lived. Her independence, usually a source of fierce pride, felt momentarily dwarfed by the sheer enormity of what had just happened. She had been on the precipice of a new chapter, certainly, but this? This was an entirely different genre. The urge to share, to shout the news from the rooftops, was almost unbearable. Her phone felt heavy in her hand as she scrolled to Eleanor's contact. Her grandmother would simply adore this. "Grandma." Sarah's voice practically vibrated with suppressed excitement the moment Eleanor answered. "Sarah, darling. To what do I owe this delightful surprise? Everything all right? You sound like you've just won the lottery." Eleanor's voice, a comforting blend of warmth and gentle curiosity, immediately put Sarah at ease. "Better than the lottery, Grandma, honestly," Sarah giggled, pacing her small living room, the phone pressed tight to her ear. "You are not going to believe this. Remember how I told you about the package, and the delivery guy? Oh, yes, the one you said was a bit of a charmer? And heavy, you mentioned. Did you finally open it, dear?" Eleanor's tone was light, but Sarah could hear the underlying thread of genuine interest. "I did. And you will never guess who delivered it." "Well, not exactly delivered, but he came back, Grandma. Mr. Henderson. And he's Henry." Our Henry. The words tumbled out, a joyous cascade of revelation. There was a beat of silence on the other end, a pause so profound Sarah wondered if the connection had dropped. Then, a soft gasp, followed by a shaky, almost disbelieving, "Henry? My Henry? Oh, Sarah, are you absolutely sure?" "Positive, Grandma. He recognized your painting. He described it perfectly, said he helped you pick out the frame. And he remembered the stories you told him about my mom, about everything. He's older, of course, but it's him. He's here." Sarah's voice cracked with emotion, a surprising wellspring of tenderness bubbling up. Another soft sound from Eleanor, this time like a muffled sob. "Oh, my goodness. After all these years, my Henry. I never thought. I never truly believed I'd ever see him again. What does he look like? Is he well? Did he remember me?" The questions poured out, a torrent of long-suppressed hope and longing. "He did, Grandma. He remembered you perfectly. He seemed relieved, I think. And he looks good, a bit gruff, but with kind eyes. He's coming to meet you. He said he'd love to visit, maybe next week." Eleanor let out a joyous laugh, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Next week. Oh, my heart. Sarah, this is truly a new chapter, isn't it? For all of us. You clever girl, you." To think a simple package, her voice trailed off, filled with a mix of wonder and burgeoning happiness. "We'll bake his favorite lemon bars, darling. And I have so many stories to tell him. So many." Sarah smiled, a genuine, wide grin that reached her eyes. "I know, Grandma. I'm so happy for you. For all of us." The unexpected turn of events hadn't just reconnected old lovers, it had woven a new, vibrant thread into the fabric of her own life, promising warmth, connection, and a future far richer than she could have imagined.